The United Nations compound in Nairobi buzzed with attention no one quite knew how to name. History was unfolding, certainly, but not the kind people expected. The alien ship, a vast, obsidian spearhead hanging in the sky like a frozen thunderbolt, had arrived without warning 3 days ago. And to the surprise of every nation-state and intelligence agency on Earth, it came not with weapons, but with emissaries. The Valoran Concordat, an alliance of 12 alien species, most of whom looked like nature, had flipped through Lovecraft and Carl Sagan simultaneously, had been monitoring Earth for some time. Their consensus: humans were primitive, aggressive, emotionally volatile, but ultimately harmless. A curiosity. A delayed evolutionary footnote. Enter Gunnery Sergeant Marcus Callahan, call sign Grim. He wasn't supposed to be here. This is a joke, right? Marcus muttered as he adjusted the stiff blue UN liaison uniform that didn't quite fit over his shoulders. I fought through Fallujah, ran Black Ops in the Arctic, and now I'm escorting a squid and a talking iguana through a photo op. His handler, a jittery diplomatic aide named Kenneth Shaw, gave a tight smile. You're here to show the flag, Sergeant. Represent humanity. Smile. Don't scare the guests. Too late, Marcus said dryly, eyeing the approaching Concordat delegation. They were led by Ambassador Kazireth of the Kolani, a species with shimmering chitin plating and 6 spider-like legs. His translator device emitted a neutral British accent that made his smug tone even more irritating. The human enforcer, Kazireth clicked. It is fascinating that your kind still maintains militarized guards for diplomatic ceremonies. We abandoned such displays several millennia ago. Very theatrical. Marcus didn't blink. We abandoned powdered wigs and human sacrifice too. But here we are. Shaw flinched. Kazireth let out a clicking series of sounds, amusement, derision, and glided forward into the UN Assembly Hall, flanked by his attendants. The humans followed, trying not to sweat under the scorching African sun and the weight of galactic scrutiny. The cultural exchange began predictably. Earth showed off Beethoven and the Taj Mahal. The Valorans presented holographic philosophy cubes and a performance of synchronized electromagnetic song that made a dozen diplomats pass out from sensory overload. It was when the discussion turned to conflict history that things unraveled. We study war as a phenomenon of sociological development, Kazireth said, lounging on a zero-gravity cushion. But your species appears to have indulged in it, repeatedly, for such small territorial disputes, too. It's almost endearing, like watching infants slap each other over a toy. Marcus, standing at the edge of the room with arms crossed, didn't laugh. One of the junior alien delegates raised a translucent limb. The term war crimes was found frequently in your history logs. Can this be clarified? What distinguishes a crime during warfare from warfare itself? The room went quiet. Shaw looked horrified. The human ambassador began to respond with carefully prepared legal jargon, but Marcus cut in. You want to understand war crimes? Marcus stepped forward, voice low and steady. All right. A war crime is when we do something in war so awful, we had to make a list to remind ourselves not to do it again. Kazireth tilted his head. You regulate atrocity? Marcus gave a grim chuckle. We tried. After our second global war, we made rules: no targeting civilians, no chemical weapons, no torturing prisoners. Guess how well that stuck? You created rules knowing you would break them? Another alien asked, puzzled. No, Marcus said. We created rules because if we didn't, we'd break ourselves. He looked around the hall, suddenly aware that every eye, alien and human, was on him. I've seen soldiers shoot through walls hoping a kid isn't on the other side. I've seen medics patch up the same people who tried to kill them 10 minutes earlier. You think that makes sense? It doesn't. It's just what we do. Because we had to build something in the ruins. Kazireth blinked slowly. And yet you persist as a species. Because we choose to, Marcus said. Every day, we wake up and decide not to burn the world down again. That's not weakness. That's discipline. No one spoke for a moment. Then Kazireth turned to his delegation. Humans possess remarkable contradiction. They name horror and then attempt to contain it. Fascinating. He turned back to Marcus. And if the rules are broken? Marcus didn't hesitate. Then we become monsters. And no one's better at being monsters than us. Later that evening, Marcus sat alone on the edge of the rooftop helipad, watching the stars flicker into being over Nairobi's skyline. The air was heavy with heat and silence. Lieutenant Verrill, a slim, four-eyed alien from the Diplomatic Security Corps, approached cautiously. Unlike Kazareth, she seemed more curious than superior. Was it true? She asked, her translator soft. All that you said? Every word. Your people created rules of war, but you broke them anyway. We didn't create the rules for the war. We created them for what comes after. Verrill sat beside him, folding her limbs with surprising grace. Our people thought yours primitive, but perhaps you are simply raw, still bleeding. Maybe, Marcus said. Or maybe we just know exactly what we're capable of. That's why we hide the knives when the guests come over. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, your history terrifies some of us. Good, Marcus said, lighting a cigarette. Keeps things honest. By the time the Valoran Concordat left Earth orbit, there had been no formal declarations, no treaties signed. But something had shifted. Reports from the Valoran capital indicated that several member species had called for re-evaluation of Earth's classification from pre-stellar primitives to strategic variable. Within the Concordat Council chambers, Ambassador Kazareth gave a closed-session briefing that would later become infamous. They are not like us. They are not worse or better. They are something we have never seen before, a predator that remembers its prey, a weapon with regret. Back on Earth, Marcus Callahan received no medals, no public commendations. Just a bottle of whiskey and a cryptic message from his old CO. Nice work, Grimm. You scared the galaxy without firing a shot. And as he stood on the balcony that night, watching the stars, Marcus wondered if maybe, just maybe, that was how peace began. Not with a handshake, but with a warning. Three weeks after the Concordat delegation departed Earth, Gunnery Sergeant Marcus Callahan was back in uniform, this time without the UN blue. His camo pattern was digital gray, his boots polished out of old habit, and his sidearm holstered at the hip. He was en route to a planet most humans had never heard of, Sigma 9, a mineral-rich moon on the edge of the Valoran Concordat's territory. Officially, Marcus was part of a joint security liaison team, a PR-friendly way of saying we don't trust each other yet. A UN delegation had been invited to observe Concordat peacekeeping operations. The reformist bloc, aliens who believed Earth deserved a seat at the interstellar table, wanted to prove they could cooperate. The purists, not so much. Marcus stepped off the Concordat cruiser's drop ramp and into the heat shimmer of Sigma 9's mining colony. The landscape was stark, red plains, jagged black rock, and the constant mechanical hum of orbital drills. A young Concordat officer, Lieutenant Verrill, one of the few aliens Marcus respected, approached him at the landing pad. You made good time, she said, offering a small nod, their species' version of a salute. Marcus returned it with a curt nod. Didn't think I'd be back in action this fast. Verrill's expression darkened, her four eyes narrowing. This wasn't supposed to be action. It was meant to be a demonstration. A diplomatic show of unity. So, what happened? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she handed him a datapad. Satellite footage played, a convoy ambushed on the way to one of the deeper mining shafts. Orvax reclaimers, a splinter faction of native insurgents, had struck fast and disappeared into the tunnels. Concordat forces, rigid, heavily armored formations, had responded by deploying aerial overwatch and issuing a formal ceasefire demand. Marcus raised an eyebrow. You sent paperwork to people who just blew up your convoy? We followed standard military protocol, Verrill replied stiffly. Yeah, and got half your squad turned into crater paste. You people really need to learn about improvisation. The next day, Marcus was briefed and reluctantly granted permission to observe a Concordat sweep operation into the tunnel network. The command center buzzed with activity, holographic maps, status reports, staccato alien dialects. The Concordat colonel, a towering crystalline being named Talrex, outlined their plan in great detail. Formal declaration of presence, primary assault line, drone recon overhead, flanking suppression fire, every movement calculated, symmetrical, ceremonial. Marcus sat in the corner, sipping bitter CAF from a thermoseal mug, unimpressed. You're marching into choke points and announcing your position like it's a parade. You'll be lucky if anyone makes it out without breathing through a tube. Talrex scoffed. Your methods are unsanctioned. Barbaric. And yours are going to get your people killed, Marcus shot back. Veryl, standing nearby, didn't speak. But when she met Marcus's eyes, there was a flicker of doubt behind her disciplined posture. 3 hours later, Marcus and 2 other human operatives, Sergeant Lin Bao and Corporal Alvarez, slipped into the tunnels without fanfare. No announcement, no convoy, just light gear, suppressed weapons, and enough thermal scanning tech to ghost through rock. They made contact with the Orvax insurgents within 40 minutes. Marcus counted 5 armed hostiles guarding a cache of energy disruptors. He didn't hesitate. Lin, pop smoke. Alvarez, cover the left corner. Grenades bloomed gray smoke. 2 short bursts from a pulse rifle dropped the sentries. No shouting. No prolonged battle. Just silence and bodies cooling on the stone floor. Marcus radioed the Concordat ops team. Got your disruptors. Hostiles neutralized. Recommend you cancel your marching band and focus on intel gathering. Over the next 48 hours, Marcus's team dismantled the Orvax insurgency piece by piece. Not through overwhelming firepower, but through human tactics, ambushes, decoys, misinformation. They hacked the local comms and flooded insurgent frequencies with fake orders. Sent food supply drones to wrong coordinates. Even booby-trapped abandoned gear to induce paranoia. The Orvax fell apart from the inside. Veryl watched it all unfold from the operations tent, stunned. She'd studied hundreds of Concordat campaigns, but she had never seen an enemy forget how to fight. What you're doing isn't war, she said to Marcus one night over rations. It's psychological destruction. Marcus just shrugged. War isn't just about killing. It's about making the other guy quit before he gets the chance. Your doctrine, it's fluid. Deceptive. Yeah, he said. It's also why we're still here. By the time Concordat Command formally declared the operation a success, Marcus's team had already extracted their gear and scrubbed the site clean. Official reports would credit a joint effort. No one would mention that the Concordat's ceremonial formations never even made contact. Marcus sat on a rusting cargo container, chewing jerky and cleaning his rifle, when Talrex approached. The Crystal General looked down at him, unreadable. You disregarded protocol, violated several interspecies engagement codes, and you succeeded. Marcus gave a half-smile. Funny how that works. Talrex's faceted eyes reflected the twin suns above. Your kind should not be underestimated. Marcus stood and faced him. We never were. You just didn't look hard enough. That evening, a debriefing was held in the central outpost. Alien dignitaries, military analysts, and diplomats gathered to review the data. Veryl gave a presentation detailing the insurgents' collapse and subtly, carefully, highlighted Marcus's contributions. Several officers looked uncomfortable, some outraged. This sets a dangerous precedent, one of the purest commanders hissed. Their methods lack restraint. They blur the lines between combatant and civilian. Marcus, standing in the back of the room, stepped forward. You want restraint? You know what we call what I just did back on Earth. The room fell silent. A Tuesday. Kazireth, observing via hologram from his cruiser, narrowed his eyes. You didn't just defeat them. You dismantled their will. Marcus nodded. That's how you stop a war before it spreads. Later that night, Veryl found Marcus sitting alone outside the barracks, watching Sigma 9 stars rise. I think I understand now, she said quietly. Understand what? Why your people had to invent war crimes. You fight not just with weapons but with everything. Psychology, culture, memory. And sometimes you fight yourselves to remember you're still human. Marcus said nothing for a long moment. Then, "It's the only way we survive." News of the Sigma-9 operations spread through the Concordat like plasma fire. Reformist factions hailed the humans as innovative allies. Purists called them dangerous, unfit for civilized war. The HFY legend began to bloom. Rumors that humans could see in the dark, that they fought without fear, that they knew no honor because they didn't need it. In truth, Marcus didn't care about the rumors. He cared that no one else died. But deep inside, he also knew this wasn't the end. It was the spark. The footage from Sigma-9 circulated in hushed meetings and encrypted channels across the Valoran Concordat. Unofficially, it became known as the demonstration, not of human brutality, but of their efficiency, their ability to adapt, to destabilize an insurgency without overwhelming firepower, to win without permission. And that terrified the Concordat's ruling elite. Back on Earth, Marcus Callahan was grounded. Not for disobedience, but because too many factions in the Concordat were arguing over him. His actions had become a diplomatic fault line. To some, he was a tactical savant. To others, a symptom of everything that made humanity dangerous. But while Marcus cooled his heels in a debriefing center in Berlin, events in the stars were escalating. The Concordat High Council, a rotating assembly of delegates from each member species, met on Karzor Station, a glittering orbital platform suspended in a gas giant's magnetic belt.
It was supposed to be neutral ground.
Impartial. It wasn't. Ambassador Kazareth sat in the central chamber, his mandibles twitching as he reviewed the Sigma-9 files again. Flanking him were members of the Purist bloc, species that had enjoyed dominance for centuries and viewed humanity as a contaminant. The Reformist bloc, led by Ambassador Zal of the Vinari, a species of lithe, multi-armed philosophers, were already there, waiting with quiet confidence. Zal folded two of his arms across his chest. The humans proved on Sigma-9 that their strategic acumen rivals any Concordat member. They adapted faster than any of us expected. It's time we offer them observer status at minimum. One of the purists snorted, a sound like a hydraulic valve malfunctioning. And next, a seat on the High Council? They aren't even spacefaring on their own. We found them still launching chemical rockets. They didn't ask to be found, Zal countered. And perhaps that's the point. Meanwhile, on Earth, Marcus received an unexpected visit. Lieutenant Verrill arrived at the Berlin debriefing facility in civilian garb, accompanied by two reformist envoys. She looked different, tired, grim. "You're being recalled," she said without preamble. "But not to Earth. We're heading to Karzor Station. Now." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Because the Concordat is about to rip itself in half." As their shuttle pierced the upper atmosphere of Karzor, Verrill filled Marcus in. Sigma-9 had accelerated existing fractures. The Purist bloc was preparing a vote to revoke all cooperation with humanity. Worse, they were planning to invoke Protocol Terminus, a rarely used clause that allowed preemptive containment of emergent existential threats. In short, they wanted permission to isolate Earth. By force, if necessary. Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. "They're seriously thinking about starting a war, because they got shown up?" "They're thinking about control," Verrill replied. "You represent unpredictability. You scared them. And scared people do stupid things." When Marcus stepped into the Concordat's central council chamber, every eye turned toward him. Over a dozen species, some breathing through gills, others shimmering in low-gravity fields, watched him with open suspicion. Ambassador Kazareth took the floor. "We have reviewed the data from Sigma-9. The human operative Callahan violated over 17 interstellar engagement codes, including false flag operations, unauthorized sabotage, and psychological manipulation. And yet, he was celebrated. We ask, is this a species we want beside us or beneath us?" Zal countered smoothly. "And yet your operations failed without him. Your own people admit it." Kazareth gestured to Marcus. "Let him speak then. Let him explain to us what war means to humanity." Marcus stepped forward. No suit, no translator device.
Just his voice.
You want to know what war means to us? He began. It means compromise. It means sacrifice. It means looking someone in the eyes, someone who hates you, and deciding not to kill them unless you absolutely have to. He scanned the chamber. Some flinched. Some leaned closer. You're afraid of us because we're messy. Because we don't follow the same rules. But here's the thing, we made rules. Out of fire and ruin and blood. We invented war crimes after we committed them. We studied ourselves like a threat. You think that's savage?
No.
That's restraint. Kazareth hissed. And if that restraint fails? Then hell follows. And you don't want to meet that version of us. Silence. Then ambassadors all spoke, his voice calm. We have learned more about our new neighbors in a few months than we did with entire civilizations over centuries. I vote for cooperation. One by one, the reformists aligned behind him. The purists refused. A schism formed in real time, an event that hadn't happened in over 1,000 years of Concordat history. The chamber buzzed with chaotic signals. Some species announced neutrality. Others prepared for realignment. Marcus, still standing on the council floor, turned to Veril. What happens now? She looked around, tense.
Now?
We pray no one fires the first shot. They didn't have to wait long. Just hours later, as the reformists held a closed meeting on the station's lower decks, a Concordat military cruiser under Purist command opened fire on one of the neutral vessels docked nearby. The official claim was a systems misfire. It wasn't. Within minutes, skirmishes erupted in the orbit around Karzor. Drones collided. Escorts deployed countermeasures. One Purist vessel even boarded a reformist station ship. The Concordat had fractured. Marcus and Veril ran through the flickering corridors of the station, trying to reach the human liaison suite. Alarms blared in multiple frequencies, half of them not audible to humans. Marcus recognized the feel of it, though. War wasn't loud. It was sudden. They ducked behind a bulkhead as a detachment of Purist shock troops marched past, their armor designed for suppression, not negotiation. Marcus checked his sidearm. Veril hissed. If you shoot one, it'll start a diplomatic incident. Marcus grinned. Honey, that ship sailed. He stepped out and fired. 2 shots center mass, followed by a stun grenade. The Purist troops crumpled before they could react. Marcus grabbed one of their comms units and tuned it to an open channel. To any Concordat units still listening, this is Gunnery Sergeant Marcus Callahan of Earth. If you're not trying to kill someone who isn't shooting at you, link up at Grid 6. If you are trying to kill someone who isn't shooting at you, pray I don't find you first. Veril stared at him. What? He asked. She shook her head. You just declared a faction. Yeah, Marcus said. The sane one. That night, Karzor station burned. Not in flames, its atmosphere systems prevented that, but in fractures of unity, of faith. The Concordat wasn't just splintering politically. It was beginning to evolve. The myth of human weakness had been shattered. And with that, 1,000 assumptions went with it. Earth, once a curious on a stellar map, had become a fulcrum. And Marcus Callahan, the Marine who explained what war crimes meant, had become something more. A symbol, a warning, a catalyst. Karzor Station floated like a cracked gemstone in space. A once neutral haven for diplomacy, it was now divided by flickering force fields, weapons checkpoints, and mutinous silence. On one side, the Purist bloc, led by Kaziretha's hawkish command. On the other, a fragile coalition of reformists and neutrals trying desperately to prevent a full-scale war. Between them stood Earth's delegation, small, outgunned, underestimated. And at the center of it all, Gunnery Sergeant Marcus Callahan, who'd become something he never wanted to be, a symbol. Marcus stared at the strategic display in the reformist situation room. It showed the spreading unrest in Concordat space. Entire sectors were blinking yellow or red. Skirmishes between patrol vessels. Supply convoys getting lost. Political channels jammed with propaganda. He ran a hand through his hair. They're not just splitting. They're prepping for a long war. Veril nodded grimly. The Purists have already begun forming a parallel command structure. They've activated privateer fleets. Civilian assets are being repurposed. And they're spreading a new narrative. What kind of narrative? That you corrupted us. That your kind used forbidden tactics to fracture the Concordat. Marcus scoffed. We didn't invent forbidden tactics. We recognized them. She glanced at him. You were the match. They were the powder. He looked back at the map. Then let's see how good they are at handling fire. Back on Earth, the United Nations and planetary defense coalitions were in emergency session. A single message had come through from Karzor via encrypted quantum relay. Concordat splintering. Humans in crossfire. Request strategic autonomy and exfil support. Callahan. General Hargrove of U.S. Space Command slammed a fist on the table. Are we really going to let some alien empire decide the fate of one of our own and pretend we're not a factor? The Japanese delegate leaned forward. He knew what he was risking. But if we don't act, we'll reinforce the idea that we're weak. From the back of the room, the French defense minister spoke quietly. Then maybe it's time they learned what Earth does when it's cornered. The vote passed, unanimous. Earth was going in. Back on Karzor, Marcus assembled a mixed team of reformists, neutrals, and humans who had slipped past purist checkpoints. His new squad included Lieutenant Verrill, Concordat liaison turned defector. Corporal Alvarez, always grinning even in a firefight. Urek Zahn, a silent Varnian mercenary with talons like vibroblades. Rika Sali, a former Earth intelligence analyst turned comms specialist. Threx, a reformist drone intelligence construct who'd named itself after a human video game character. Their objective: liberate the Concordat's central data core, which the purists had seized and locked down. It contained diplomatic records, battle logs, and more importantly, evidence, proof that the purists fired the first shot. Without it, Earth would be painted as the saboteur. As they moved through the labyrinthine halls of the station's core, dark, echoing, stained by plasma fire, Marcus spoke over the comms. We're not just here to survive. We're here to rewrite the ending. They want to brand us monsters?
Fine.
Let's give them a different kind of nightmare. The purist forces guarding the data core were elite. Genetically enhanced, AI-augmented, and arrogant. They weren't prepared for human tactics. Verrill sliced through their frontline comms with viral logic puzzles that confused their targeting systems. Alvarez used decoys made from heat-shielded food trays and power cells. Threx deployed old Earth music, heavy metal, and bagpipes to disrupt their auditory equilibrium. And Marcus? Marcus went in fast, low, and dirty. He didn't kill unless he had to, but when he had to, he made it surgical, purposeful, psychological. By the time they reached the core vault, the purist defense team had fled, convinced they were facing a specialized Earth Commando division. They weren't. Just 6 people and 1 sarcastic drone. The vault opened with a deep thrum. Inside was the heart of the station, plasma conduits pulsing like veins, AI cores encased in liquid memory, and the main Concordat databank, a spire of crystalline memory, encoded in thousands of languages and thought forms. Rika linked her gear and began the download. It'll take 5 minutes, she muttered. You've got 3, Marcus said, already setting mines at the door. Outside, the purists were regrouping. And then the call came through. A signal, Earth-based, riding on an encrypted military band. This is UNV Sagan. Reinforcements inbound. We read your signal, Sergeant. We brought friends. From the edge of the system, the UNV Sagan, a state-of-the-art Earth vessel, burst into local space. It was not alone. 5 more warships followed, coalition ships from Japan, France, Kenya, Brazil, and India. It wasn't a fleet. It was a message. On Karzor, purist ships scrambled into defensive positions. But it was too late. The Sagan's AI had already targeted the power nodes of their docked craft. No kills. Just surgical EMP bursts that turned weapon systems into dead metal. A perfect display of restraint. HFY in its purest form. Inside the data core, the download completed. Marcus sealed the crystal drive into a reinforced case. Time to go. They raced through the station, Marcus's team broadcasting the truth on every open channel, footage of the ambush, audio of Kaziretha's premeditated strike, files of erased orders meant to provoke conflict. The Concordat exploded, politically, socially, psychically. Entire species withdrew support from the purists. Even some of their own commanders turned on them. The reformist bloc declared a ceasefire, and humans, against all odds, had not only survived the first contact conflict, they'd rewritten the damn rulebook. 2 weeks later, Marcus stood before the newly reformed Concord of Equals, an emergency assembly designed to rebuild from the ashes. Veryl stood beside him in formal dress. Her posture was crisp, her expression proud. Ambassador Zoll addressed the chamber. Humanity was thought primitive, dangerous, unrefined. But in their unpredictability, we found truth. They are not fearless. They are not invincible. But they are impossible to ignore. He gestured to Marcus. We welcome Earth not as a subordinate, but as an equal. Marcus didn't speak long, just enough to remind them what mattered. We didn't come here to conquer. We came here to connect. But you judged us before you knew us. And now you've seen a sliver of what we are. He glanced at Veryl, then back to the chamber. We don't want your wars. But if you drag us into one, we won't play by your rules. We'll win. And then we'll make new rules, ones that actually mean something. Later, aboard the Sagan, Marcus watched Earth rise on the forward display. Alvarez sat next to him, bruised and grinning. Think they'll ever stop being afraid of us? Marcus sipped his coffee. Maybe. One day. But I hope they never stop respecting us. And if they forget? Marcus smiled. Then I'll explain war crimes again.